Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today. Over the period of the next hour, we'll be exploring how organizations are looking at technology and data in the cloud and multi-cloud world to leverage data as a business asset. Joining me today on the webinar will be Andrew Joss, our Head of Solutions and Data Governance at Informatica, Jeff King, our Financial Services Account Director from our Platinum partner, Agile Solutions, and myself, Viren Taka, Financial Services Account Director at Informatica. So in essence, on the agenda today, what we'll be covering is the key trends that we're seeing from the market-leading data management perspective in the market when it comes to cloud, hybrid, and multi-cloud environments. We'll also be exploring how customers previously have managed to leverage this type of technology in order to achieve digital transformation, and we'll be doing a poll to get an understanding of where you are in your organization or on your particular project when it comes to cloud. Following that, we will then have a wrap-up session with questions and answers, so I would appreciate your participation. Thank you for those that have already sent through your questions, but please feel free to get them ready for that at the end of the webinar today. So in essence, digital disruption is everywhere, in both our personal and professional lives. And the organizations which are leveraging digital disruptions are truly the organizations that are winning at the moment. Competitive edge can come through using technology and using digital means in order to achieve further insight. And in essence now, the competitive marketplace has changed. Organizations are now able to utilize technology in order to grow, understand, and execute at a pace never seen before. So gone are the days where the big players owned a market share purely based on their name. Competition has increased, and now we actually see the niche players leveraging and innovating with technology to be able to create and execute at the same pace. So in essence, multi-cloud and hybrid cloud is the new reality. We are moving towards this, and we will continue to do so. 81% of enterprises are already looking at their strategy around using multiple clouds. And this is inclusive of not only the environments, for instance, AWS or Azure, but also into the cloud applications that organizations are investing in, such as Workday and Tableau, for instance. 51% of organizations are also looking at hybrid cloud strategy, in essence being able to leverage their on-premise investments over the years with their new cloud investments and collaborating the two to gain further insight and truly optimize their environment. But with all of this cloud and all of the need and nature for automation and self-service, organizations which are truly ahead of the curve are able to understand that our approach has to be bimodal. Yes, of course, we can increase agility and dynamism within a business when we do provide self-service with these applications, but we need to also be conscious of being able to govern this self-service as moving through. So when we look at traditional iPaaS solutions, integration platform as a service solutions in the market today, we see that they very much fulfill one of these four key components that we see. So cloud data integration, API management, cloud application integration, or connectivity. And in a previous world where cloud was kind of new and still being adopted, this very much fulfilled the requirement. But now with the utilization of cloud and cloud technologies across your environment, organizations are starting to see that there is a wider breadth which needs to be covered when looking at their solutions. The issue now is that the traditional iPaaS solutions are seeming fragmented and are difficult to actually scale. Organizations are now looking for an end-to-end data management solution and not a patchwork of technologies to be able to service the data that they actually use. And in essence, the way in which we're connecting within our environments has changed. The explosion of APIs and applications means that we do now have an ability to connect into different areas, but the question is, how do we actually do that efficiently and in the most optimum way? When we look at traditional iPaaS, we can see that the breadth and requirement has very much outgrown what the offering is on the market. And in essence, technology needs to be driven by this new breadth and new requirement that we see. So with that, I'll hand over to my colleague Andy Joss for us to explore the three major key trends that we're seeing when looking at cloud and multi-cloud environments.
Thank you, Viren. So just picking up on what Viren was saying, Really, we're seeing three major trends in the marketplace around technology being driven by these key trends. The first one is about the offloading of data and the data warehouse into the cloud. Organizations are looking at how they can take the technologies and the data that they've got and how they can surface that up into cloud platforms and cloud applications to try and take better advantage of the advantages of the cloud platform. The second trend is very much now about the on-premise application, the traditional on-premise applications moving to new, dynamic, and a lot more cost-effective software as a service-based applications, certainly sitting in a multi-cloud environment. And then thirdly, the other main trend we're seeing is about organizations who are connecting to the cloud, utilizing application programming interfaces or APIs, really to drive their innovation agenda and to help unlock the value of data. And of course, for some organizations, actually it's a journey across all three. And what's driving a lot of this are challenges that we're seeing organizations facing. They're still facing the challenges of having disparate systems and data sitting in silos, little or no integration across the business, no single version of the truth about either the customer or the products, the services they offer. Also trying to keep up with the competition. What are the major competitors and the new entrants in the market doing? But also how to be more efficient, how to save money, and how to be more effective at what they do. So these key trends are absolutely driving technology, as Viren was talking about. What I wanted to do was just explore some of these in a little bit more detail with you and give you some customer use case examples. And the first one is really about this idea of offloading data into the world of the cloud. Now, what we're seeing is organizations who are suffering a number of key challenges with their traditional database or data warehouse system that are increasingly costly to run. We're seeing the cost of both hardware being still very inexpensive, but actually compared to cloud and cloud solutions is still quite expensive. They're also time-consuming to maintain and also expensive to expand. Organizations are increasingly using and collecting more and more data, and therefore there's a cost to doing that, particularly when it's on-premise. And what increasingly we're seeing is organizations looking at a suite of capabilities, and more commonly, organizations are looking at how to take advantage of the cost, the efficiency, and the effectiveness of cloud-based databases or data warehouses. So this idea of offloading to the cloud, we see a lot of organizations who are undertaking this, but actually what this is driving is a whole series of capabilities which are being required, which really goes above and beyond what Viren was just talking about. Capabilities such as the ability to integrate the data. It sounds like a fairly obvious thing to need to do, but clearly we need to be able to integrate the data from the on-premise data and applications up into the cloud and into multiple clouds. We need to do that effectively and efficiently. And of course, when we do that, we need to be able to transform and change that data so it's representative and accurate for the systems that need it, regardless as to where they sit. And it may seem obvious that actually doing that in a performant manner is actually becoming extremely important. We're seeing organizations who are moving very rapidly towards much more real-time or near real-time processing of data, particularly when it comes to understanding the needs of their customers and how they're going to respond to that. So therefore, performance is being increasingly seen as critical as a differentiator. We talk about something called mass ingestion, and this is really about organizations who are trying to tap into some of the new sources of data available and do that quickly and effectively. Organizations are looking at, for example, streaming of data, the Internet of Things, and social media, where they can tap into literally huge amounts of data and try and drive insights and knowledge from that to help either better services or better support for their customers. But doing that quickly and efficiently can be quite challenging. So being able to do that at speed and at scale is really important. And finally, of course, the ability to actually control how all of this works. Viren talked earlier about this idea of being bimodal, the fact that we want to be able to have the agility and the scalability and flexibility, but also do that in a governed and controlled manner. Well, part of being able to do that, of course, is being able to control the flow of what happens and how things manage between all of these different environments, and do that in a way which is relevant for the entire organization. Now, we have a use case example here. It actually comes from a manufacturing company who are looking at this similar sort of problem and this type of challenge. They were looking at how they could upgrade the existing analytics capability they had in-house, and they really were looking at what we would call a hybrid data warehouse environment. And that's really due to the fact that the amount of data they had was doubling, and of course they were finding scaling of all of the existing environments on-premise was becoming extremely expensive. Added to that, they were trying to tap into some of the new bigger data types, such as the Internet of Things type data, and provide capabilities to their business users to rapidly take advantage of all this data. Now, for them, this was very much about how quickly they could do it, and also about providing a self-service analytic capability to meet the needs of their business. And why did they choose the Informatica platform to do that? Well, they wanted something that was both easier to deploy and maintain, but also scale and work across this very hybrid architecture we've talked about. So for them, it was really key in terms of speed and performance, but the results really speak for themselves. So the second trend that Viren referred to earlier was really what we call multi-cloud and hybrid. Now, for organizations, you'd probably be quite familiar with some of this. Increasingly, what we're seeing is particularly business parts of an organization are very often going out and acquiring software as a service type applications to fulfill a specific set of needs. It may be from a sales function looking at maybe Salesforce, or from an HR function and looking at Workday, or from a back office or from an ERP process, maybe looking at Oracle or SAP, and there's clearly many others as well. The challenge, of course, with this environment is we now have a proliferation of data and applications scattered around the cloud. And therefore, the challenges that this is giving us is sometimes it's about lock-in. And many of these organizations clearly want you to use their technologies solely to try and drive value from the platform they provide, but that's hard to do in a multi-cloud and in a hybrid world. The amount of data and the amount of systems that we now have to deal with has now got extremely complex. We now have more data management challenges just purely by the fact that we've got more data and more systems that we have to look after. And of course, then actually having our business running across all of this is now also becoming challenging, given the fact that we've now got this proliferation of data and applications in what is quite a complex world. So looking at that trend, what kind of capabilities are organizations looking for? Well, actually, what we found in this particular space is actually much more around what we call partnerships. And for us at Informatica, this is really important. Partnerships are about how we provide capability to our customers and to our partners, but doing it through the major platforms, certainly in the cloud and the multi-cloud space, whether it be the traditional platforms themselves, such as Amazon, Microsoft, or Google, or through the software as a service vendors, examples such as Salesforce. So Informatica has done a great deal of work to ensure that the technology we provide is deeply embedded in all of these platforms to make it simple and easy for organizations to adopt this technology rapidly and efficiently. Now, an organization that was looking at doing this, in this particular case as our use case example, was in fact a biotech company. They had very fast-growing data volumes, as you can imagine, for many in the biotech space. And they were looking for an agile, comprehensive self-service analytics and BI solution really for their many stakeholders. What they needed was services to integrate the enterprise data into effectively the cloud platform and then start to use self-service analytics on top of that. They really wanted to try and drive the ability for their analysts to now focus on data analysis. It sounds obvious, but their data analysts were spending time just integrating data, trying to do the analysis. And they were also looking for what we call smart KPIs. These smart KPIs really gives insight into gaps and errors in the process and how data is being managed, really to keep the business moving. But why did they do it? Well, it's about saving money by moving away from a whole number of third-party vendors and choosing a platform that does all of these things for them. If we move on to the third and final trend, then this one is very much about how we're now having to cope with the complexity of both data, metadata, and application APIs. In this particular space, we now have lots of data, and clearly we have lots of metadata associated with them. And in the world of cloud, we now have this concept of application programming interfaces, or APIs, to make it easy for us to tap into this data regardless of the platform and where it's stored. And clearly some of the challenges we've also heard about is really about trying to do this to drive innovation. But actually not having the right capabilities in place to manage this in a governed way actually inhibits an organization from driving this innovation in a timely manner. It reduces their time to market. And part of the challenge comes from the fact that we now have not just a spaghetti of data in our premises, but also we have an application spaghetti out in the cloud. So suddenly the ability to tap into all this data to drive innovation has gotten harder. So this lack of API and data governance is really starting to hurt organizations in terms of the speed of the adoption of new technology and their ability to deliver innovation quickly to outsmart the competition. So to help address those needs, part of what we were looking at Informatica was really a series of capabilities to try and speed that process up and make that process a lot simpler. So some capabilities such as an enterprise data catalog. This is a catalog that not only gives an organization a good understanding of what data they have, but it doesn't really matter where it sits. It could be on-premise, it could be in the cloud, it could be in multiple clouds. And of course, it's also about making all those APIs available too. We also then talk about data security and data governance. And one of the key tenets that we talked about a little bit earlier was about the fact that we need to have security around all of this. We need to make sure that the data is secure, and that we also need to be able to govern and control it. So when we're giving access to, for example, an API, we want to know that the data is the right data for the right purpose, being used for the right people at the right point in time. And lastly, with this proliferation of APIs, we want to be able to discover them. So we want to use the latest in technology, such as artificial intelligence and machine learning, to really help drive understanding and awareness of what we've got so we can tap into it. Now, a use case example of this was a customer. They were a property company. They were looking for a 360-degree view of their customer, and they were really looking for something in real time. This was to drive customer insights to help drive both cross-sell and upsell opportunities. They were looking at a hybrid environment, really, where they had data across a number of cloud applications in the software services space and also on-premise applications, and the ability to move data quickly and easily across all of these. Now, for them, this was very much about driving upsell and cross-sell, and the results of using the Informatica platform really enabled them to target an additional 20% revenue increase just from cross-sell and upsell alone. But actually, also the side benefit was that they had real-time integration between their cloud and their on-premise applications, and that enabled them to drive much better customer service and much better customer experience. So what I've just taken you through there is a number of use case examples just to demonstrate some of these trends and how organizations are seeing and feeling it, and how Informatica has been responding to that. Coming back to the point that Viren was talking about earlier, this need to support new use cases. What we're seeing from organizations, as Viren was talking about earlier, is that the existing capabilities, frankly, now are just not enough. Capabilities that organizations had on-premise, they now need to have in the cloud as well. And that also brings great opportunity, as well as for some organizations, great challenge, particularly if they're locked into organizations or vendors who are driving them down a particular route. Informatica takes a very simple view on all of this, in that all the things that organizations need to do, whether they do it on-premise, they need to do in the cloud as well. And it needs to be done in a scalable and a smart way. Now, part of the way that we do that is not just through availability of technology, that, for example, the ability to manage and control data quality up in the cloud, the ability to prepare and manage data from an analytics viewpoint up in the cloud, but also to add technology to try and make all of this simpler and a lot more sophisticated. We're looking at and are using artificial intelligence and machine learning to help drive things like automation. Automation is really important in terms of driving the cost and efficiency out of the infrastructure and unlocking the value of data. It makes the process simpler and easy for organizations to tap into the data they're working with. So actually, the approach that Informatica took is actually relatively simple. It says for an organization looking at their enterprise cloud data management needs, we really need to look at any integration pattern. The patterns that organizations want to use is going to be dictated by the needs that they have for their applications, their services, and the offers that they're taking to market. And it doesn't really matter what type of data, how it's being used, what type of applications and processes. We need to be able to support any integration pattern. We also need to be able to support any kind of user. And clearly in this new world, we have people who come from the traditional IT and data community, all the way through to people who are true business users. All of these organizations and people are very much part of the stakeholder community in our new world. And finally, any kind of data. And it doesn't matter if it's data that already resides or needs to reside in the cloud, if it's on-premise, big data, small data, real-time data, it doesn't really matter. We need to support any type of data. We need to do that in a very organized and sophisticated way, and we use technology such as artificial intelligence, machine learning to unlock the value from it, to try and, through automation, make the whole process simpler. So hopefully what that's done is that's taken you then through to effectively how organizations are looking at these trends and how they're responding to it. So at this point, I'm just going to move in a slightly different direction, and we're going to have a little bit of a poll. So what you should find then on the go-to is a poll that you can then respond to. And we've just effectively asked you 3 simple questions. If you could just respond to these, that would be fantastic. And this is really just to give us a sense of what you're seeing out in your particular part of the market. So in terms of what we're looking at, what are organizations seeing? Are organizations seeing the offloading of data in the data warehouse to the cloud? Are they seeing that as being some of the key challenges that they've got? Is it organizations seeing on-premise applications moving to software as a service and to multi-cloud? Or is it about connecting to the cloud, utilizing APIs to unlock the value of data? So the idea of the poll is, again, just to give all of us a sense as to what organizations are seeing and where organizations feel they are in terms of their journey to the cloud across these different trends that we've been talking about earlier, and about how the technology can be applied to help organizations unlock the value of their data. So thank you for your answers. I can see from the polling system we've had a great deal of response already, and we'll come back to the results of that a little bit later once people have had the opportunity to respond. I just wanted to give you some customer examples now of organizations who've been going along these journeys, and to give you a sense as to what they've been doing and how they've been doing it. And the first one in the world of financial services, Encino, which is an organization which was founded back in 2012 in the US. It was really started by a team of entrepreneurs and bankers who were seeking to remove the inefficiency from the commercial lending process. Today they are considered a worldwide leader in cloud banking. So what were they trying to do? Well, they were trying to integrate loan data from an assortment of cloud and on-premise banking systems and deliver real-time integration to their streamlined banking operations. And the idea here is to take advantage of loan volume growth whilst reducing costs. They looked at and used the Informatica cloud platform to integrate data from more than over 100 banking customer systems, utilizing a whole series of integration processes to move the data around swiftly and efficiently, really to automate the process of how they manage data in and out of their loans and deposit books, and also how to manage things like reports from credit bureaus. The idea behind all of this, of course, is to try and speed up the process, but also then make their business much more efficient and a lot more effective. They're also using data from software as a service applications such as Salesforce as part of that process. So they really do have a hybrid environment. So for them, actually, the real benefit in all of this, of course, is actually the way that they've done this using the Informatica platform has helped reduce the loan origination and closing time by 34%, by over a third, which is a significant amount of time for any organization. There's clearly good ways of monetizing all of that, but also about improving the time to market by over 30% for their integration, and also them help grow year over year while saving development costs on an annual basis. So that gives you a sense for an organization who are looking at this in how they're using the technology in that multi-cloud and hybrid environment to really drive tangible business value in terms of that time saving. Another example for you is also out of the financial services space. This organization is called Finastra. Now, some of you may also know them as Misys, as they've been known for quite a long period of time. Now, they're a financial services software company. They've really been focusing on retail and corporate banking, but also lending, treasury, capital markets, etc., based here out of the UK. And they provide software services to a whole raft of banks around the globe. So their vision really is to transform the global financial services industry by making financial institutions both resilient, more effective, and more competitive. So for them, it's about becoming a data-ready organization. And clearly coming with that is rapid growth and acquisition to load in the complexity, to make life harder for them to try and do all of these things simply and efficiently for their customers. Thinking about how this impacts the performance of the organization is clearly very, very important. And they were clear that what they wanted to do was make sure that they were very focused on delivering the right level of service needed for their clients. So they're using the Informatica platform really as part of what they do to try and unify the processes across all their systems, their data and applications, to give them that trusted view of data, so they can start from a sales viewpoint and also from an operations viewpoint to tap into that data to provide the right level of service. They're also planning to integrate Salesforce data with Marketo, which is clearly sales to marketing, to provide transparency in the lead to deal conversion and tracking process. Now, to address all of this, particularly across their corporate processes and of course all the applications over the cloud, that they need technology that enables them to do that efficiently and very effectively. They use the Informatica platform really as the core capability to move data around their organization, to move it across the different sources of data and systems. And partly, of course, it's to help provide better service. But simple things like decreasing the lead to cash turnaround time as being a net benefit of doing all of this. So again, another organization who are in the financial services space are really looking how they can tap into this new world of cloud so they can adapt better and faster to change and provide the services they need to their clients. And the third and final example I'm going to share with you today is actually slightly different industry from financial services, but an organization we're probably all very familiar with, which is British Telecom, or BT. Now, most of you will probably know that the major provider of telecommunications networks and services in the UK. They've got around about 1 million customers in BT Business, which handles a diverse range of communication needs, including telephony, broadband networking, cloud, etc., for a range of customers, all the way from single service customers to large corporate accounts. Now, part of all of their program is really then about managing the data on behalf of their customers and driving that through across their organization. Now, BT was a major Salesforce user, and as part of the process, they wanted to tap into organizational data and bring that together from multiple sources to make the whole process of managing their data a lot simpler. Now, they were doing that quite traditionally in a very traditional way, which is actually working manually of moving data around. And typically, it was taking them probably around about 2 weeks to manage the data across all the different applications that they needed to move it to. In the Informatica world, this is simply something that we can address relatively straightforwardly, given the processes we have, the technology we have, but also the partnerships we have with organizations such as Salesforce. But the reason they're doing this is actually because they didn't have sufficient insight into, for example, some of the opportunities they had across their organization. So they really wanted to streamline and accelerate the processes. This included unifying reporting across 9 different Salesforce instances deployed across multiple business units. Automating the delivery of insights is clearly going to be important for executive decision makers, and reducing that 2-week turnaround time was extremely important to them. Ultimately, though, it's about consolidating all of their bid data into a single dashboard. Now, BT worked with Informatica to create a whole new series of capabilities based on the Salesforce platform, and using the Informatica technology, we reduced the 2-week turnaround process, which was done manually, into a daily automated feed. And that was a significant and welcome change to be received by the sales organization. Now, after the event, we'll be sending you a link. There's a video which is available on YouTube where you can hear from BT themselves about the story and feel how well it went for them as an organization. So hopefully that's given you a sense of what organizations have seen and some examples of how organizations have been responding to this. At this point, I just wanted to give you a bit of a sense from what happened with the poll. And one of the things that we recognized pretty much straight away was actually there's probably a clear leader from the poll, and thank you for everybody who took part in that. So of the 3 questions that we were asking about what is the most pressing issue when it comes to cloud, the leader in all of this at 44% of respondents was actually offloading of data and the data warehouse to the cloud. Probably not a great deal of a surprise because it's one of the areas that most organizations see they can get rapid value from clearly very quickly, and as the examples earlier probably testifies to that. The second most common one was actually connecting to the cloud, utilizing APIs to unlock the value of data. Actually, that was a score of 33%. 33% of people thought that was the most important, most pressing issue. And actually, finally, on-premise applications moving to software as a service and multi-cloud, that came in at 22%. So what this tells us then is that for many organizations who are in this space and are looking at the most pressing issues, the moving of data to the data from on-premise to the data warehouse in the cloud, clearly the most important, but then utilizing APIs to unlock the value of data is then just as almost important. So thank you to everybody who took part in the poll. Now with that, what I wanted to then do is just take you in a slightly different direction. So we've kind of heard about the technology and the examples of organizations who've used that, and all this sounds great, but actually, where do we go from here? And for that, I'm going to pass you over to Jeff, who will help you understand where we go from here. Jeff?
That's super. Thank you, Andy. Thanks also for those poll results and for those 3 case studies you gave us there, Encino, Finastra, and BT. Yes, just before I talk about actually where we do go from here, first I should say that we're independent specialists in data, and certainly in our view, our clear view actually, Informatica certainly leads in cloud data integration. But of course, as Andy was suggesting there, any projects such as these only really succeed with practical, grounded implementations. And I'll talk about how we go about that in just a moment. If I just briefly before that describe Agile, in a nutshell, we're one of the UK's leading data management and analytics consultancies. We've been going since 2001. We're UK leader in several areas of data, such that several international blue chip and mid-market organizations work with us on their specialist data projects. What that means from your point of view, the attendees' point of view today, is that we know how to get the most value from your data, That means from the technology, we consult, we advise, and we provide solutions to business pain, and all in an agile way. We're now approaching just over 120 permanent employees. So as to what we should look at from here in terms of the practicalities, you can see on screen there, we have that model for to firstly, initially, to assess where our clients are in terms of data platform modernization. I think actually some of this was borne out by those poll results just a few moments ago about that prioritization of the need to offload data to the data warehouse and in the cloud. What I'm sure most of you will think when you look at this screen is that two questions jump out at you. One is, where are you now? And the other is, where do you want to be? And obviously you can use that as a guide, and obviously we can work out for you what is the optimum route to get to where you want to be. I'm conscious as well that looking at that, you can see those two questions I asked, where are you now, where do you want to be, very much as IT questions, and you can see there from the 0 to 5 model where you might get to. And IT is obviously very much about the efficiency, the collaboration, the productivity, the agility and the scalability. There is, of course, to this a third question. If you look at that bottom line there, it says value, it has the pound signs. Really, that question there is about more on the business side, which is what is the financial advantage to your company of this move? The core answer to that question is really always, it's about monetizing the data. And if you think, obviously, we're all aware of the companies that have done that well, have learned how to monetize their data, the Amazons and the Googles. And that's really what we want to do for our customers, both on the IT side, at the top end of that picture, and then on the business side, the ultimate driver for it all, the bottom line of that picture. I guess that also obviously leads to the question as to why us, and I mean both obviously Informatica and Agile Solutions. Well, in terms of Informatica, as you can see there, they certainly are Gartner's industry leader by quite a margin in all these areas. And certainly I would also describe it as the world's best technically, and also in terms of robustness. And you can see there, deployed in over 9,000 organizations worldwide. In terms of ourselves, Agile Solutions, yes, we specialize in this area and deriving the real value that you want to get from your data. And we've got very extensive experience of deploying this. We're EMEA's partner, Informatica's Partner of the Year in EMEA, for example, and also Latin America. So I guess, how would we go about in terms of helping on the next stages of this journey? And I guess the key questions that you would want asked would be around such things as the likely costs and the likely length of time to achieve these benefits. And I'm sure you'd also ask about the riskiness of the work, as it were, how much risk is involved. Well, to answer those questions about cost and length of time, it very much depends on the number of data sources to be integrated. Certainly in our case, in the last year or so, we've implemented this for a number of clients in a number of different sectors. So, for example, Sage, the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham, Crest Nicholson, the FTSE 250 house builder, Shelter, the housing charity, JLL, the property management company. So across quite a number of sectors. In terms of risk, the answer is actually the risk involved with this is very, very low. The reason for that is what we found in practical terms is that agile development methodologies work best for data projects. And we've developed a way of getting the best out of those methodologies. It's actually, you can see on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there, AIM. Stands for Agile Information Management, and it's not just about the project management side of things, that agile methodology. It's also about how we maximize the value of the technology that's used, how we structure the teams, how we design the solution, how we do the architecture. And using those sort of methods, what we find in terms of costs and length of time, certainly some of those clients I named just a few moments ago, they've certainly gained benefits in less than 2 months from our starting work with them in this area. You can also see on screen, and actually you can download this off the webinar as we're speaking, that Informatica Cloud Starter Pack. that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen there, that offer it comes with 5 connectors, and it's based really on what we found our customers typically want. I think the other important thing I should say that we can offer as well is we would certainly offer a free of charge workshop, be that a morning or an afternoon. And really what we'd look to do there would be to ascertain the likely depth and extent of what's most required for your company to move you along that data platform modernization that we looked at just a few moments ago. And what we'd also aim to do from that is understand the high-level view of the likely benefits to your company, both the technical benefits and the financial benefits. What we'd certainly do with that, there's no charge for that, and we'll be able to deploy one of our principal consultants. And really, say in terms of output, we'd look to give you a high-level guide to the project plan for the integration and the likely costs and timescales.
Thank you for that, Jeff. So I appreciate both Andy and Jeff's perspectives on there, both from a technology perspective, but also from a delivery perspective as well. So in summary, in essence, we know that the move to cloud is happening now. And Andy, thank you for including a few different commercial examples, because I think one key thing to remember is that with us within the financial service space at the moment are still on the cusp of actually innovating with cloud technologies. And in essence, there's other industry verticals which have already been able to develop and innovate in the way which we are now looking to do within the financial services space. So yes, cloud is happening and it is a journey for everybody. But there are various factors which need to come into play when looking at cloud and when trying to implement a real cloud, a multi-cloud and hybrid environment strategy. And the key and final piece on that is partnering for success. These solutions and technologies all work well together once optimized and implemented in the correct way. And in essence, this is how true digital disruption and digital transformation can be achieved. So now we're going to go into the questions and answer session. We've had a few questions come in already, so thank you for that. And please do feel free to start sending them through as we begin the session itself. So Andy, I think the first question that we have has actually come in for you, and maybe Jeff, you could also give your knowledge from what you're seeing in the marketplace at the moment. But Andy, which cloud ecosystems are you most commonly seeing as being used by organizations for analytics?
For analytics, so thank you very much. That's a really good question. So I think if one of the common themes I'm seeing is that organizations are looking at a number of factors from an analytics viewpoint, certainly when it comes to use of cloud. I think they're looking at the availability of the platform. I think they're looking at the availability of places to store the data, whether it be databases or data warehouses. I think they're looking at the availability of different types and styles of analytics, whether it be kind of traditional reporting analytics all the way through to predictive and prescriptive analytics. And I also think they're looking at the availability of technologies, maybe in some of these newer, more leading edge spaces, to try and take advantage of what's available on the platform to really drive advantage. And that would be use of maybe artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms. So I think in terms of the platforms, we're seeing organizations are certainly looking at the AWS and the Azure platforms. Clearly, these are very comprehensive platforms in terms of all the services I've talked about. And increasingly, over the last month or two, we've seen the rise of Google Cloud as being also another very attractive place as they're starting to develop and deploy technologies that enables organizations not only to house their data on that platform, but to take advantage of a raft of different new and existing analytics capabilities to really unlock the value of that data.
Thanks, Andy. I would certainly agree with that. It looks to be very much a three-horse race at the moment. Like you, certainly to date, most of our work has been on Azure and on AWS, but what's becoming clear is that there are a number of well-known, blue-chip household names that are making a definite decision to deploy Google, or rather to deploy on Google. And so certainly it seems to be those three above all.
And I think probably one last thing I would just add to Jeff's point is that I think increasingly what we're seeing as organizations are making a multi-cloud strategic decision. They're rather being necessarily locked into a single cloud platform. They're looking at a range of cloud platforms, really as a way of taking advantage of the best and the latest technology from an analytics viewpoint. And clearly that plays into the strengths of the Informatica platform really well.
Okay, so Andy, you actually mentioned something quite interesting there, which feeds into another question that's come in, and that's the strategy that organizations are actually using when implementing and investing in cloud. One of the things that we spoke about a little bit earlier on, and you did cover it, was this idea of bimodal techniques. And what we've been asked is to explain a little bit more on what we mean as bimodal techniques, and potentially an example of where you've seen it at the moment, Andy, with some of the customers we've been speaking to.
Yeah, and it's a great question. It's one that we hear increasingly being asked. And this is really the idea when we talk about bimodal, that really what we're looking for is two different and sometimes opposing, but actually necessarily complementary capabilities. The first one is around, utilizing and taking advantage of the platform capabilities, really to drive that innovation agenda that we talked about, and to provide agility and to provide a lot of key capabilities that clearly are come with the cloud platform. But actually, the flip side of that is to say, well, if we're going to do that, we also have to do that in a controlled manner. And what we're trying to avoid is avoid huge amounts of data sitting outside the cloud where people don't understand what it is, or where it is, or how it's being used, or why it's being used. So this notion of being bimodal is really about giving organizations through these cloud capabilities not only the ability to be agile and drive innovation, but to do that in a much more controlled manner. Now, that control comes in what we would call data governance. It's a well-known technique. It's traditionally come from the on-premise world, but actually in the world of financial services, it's something we know and understand quite well. All of those techniques and those ideas, they apply in the world of cloud, multi-cloud and hybrid cloud just as much as they do for anything which sits on-premise. And so the idea here is to say, regardless of what type of data it is, where it sits, how it's being used, who's using it, then actually what we want to understand are some of the basics of that data, which is what is it? What does it represent? Which part of the business does it come from? Which part of the process is it associated with? If I want to change it, what's the downstream impact? And of course, in these days, we've got a lot of regulation that we need to deal with. So which regulations apply to these different parts of the data, not just at a data viewpoint, but also at a process viewpoint. So I think coming back to the question about referring to bimodal, it's really this idea that we want all the advantages, but we want to do that in a controlled and managed way. And clearly the Informatica platform gives organizations the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Andy. So Jeff, this question is focused towards your area of the world and your area of expertise. What have been the most common challenges organizations are facing when adopting a multi-cloud approach?
I think what has become clear, yes, as Andy said, we have had a couple of instances where our customers have wanted to do that, and certainly we can connect. It can take slightly longer than if you were to connect with just using one of those main clouds, but certainly we've been able to overcome any of those issues. More usually, actually, the issue would be if you are to do with understanding the full extent to where data is stored, not just which clouds. And from there, once we know the map, we can usually connect to just about everything. So a common cloud wouldn't be an issue. Perhaps an obscure database that isn't that well mapped would be more of an issue.
And I think just to add to that, I think one of the things that I've seen in a number of organizations recently is the idea in this multi-cloud world, then we're going to have applications and we're going to have data that's sitting in lots of different disparate places. And the challenge for many organizations is quite often people who sit inside the lines of business are looking at these technologies to drive value for their particular business. So some of these capabilities, of course, are very often both purchased and deployed outside of the understanding and control of the IT or the data department. So increasingly, we're seeing this kind of proliferation of data and application availability in this multi-cloud world. And I think partly this is organizations trying to take advantage of what's available, but I think also there's a bit of a cultural challenge here as well, in which it's so easy to be able to take advantage of these capabilities, given the pricing models, given the scalability capabilities, given how easy it is to get this capability onboarded, then actually it's so simple. The challenge being is that when organizations do that and they do it in an uncontrolled manner, then actually it starts to cause further downstream problems for the rest of the organization. So I think there's a little bit of a culture challenge that we need to address here. which is to get organizations in different parts of the organization to recognize that, yes, take advantage of these new capabilities in the cloud, but we do need to do it in that controlled manner to make sure that we don't go make life harder for ourselves. So coming back to this kind of bimodal approach, I think organizations are rapidly starting to recognize that's really important if they want to take advantage of all of this to drive the innovation that they so need.
Thanks for that, Andy and Jeff. So I guess the third question has just come through just now. So who would be required to attend if we wanted to take up your Q4 offer? So Jeff, I think that's focused towards you.
Okay, thank you, Viren. I think there's really two groups of people we'd hope to talk to in that instance. One is obviously IT, and the other is the business side. So from IT, and I suspect and certainly hope that most of you on this call will understand the core of the offer here and can see some of the benefits. What we do find and sometimes in the past is that can take slightly longer from the business side, which is not to say, there's certainly some very significant financial benefits that have been won by some of our customers already doing this. But those two groups will work best together. So if we could see either, I think we'd ideally look at sort of like a 2 to 2.5 hour workshop with you, with those two groups. From that, we should hopefully be able to map out pretty much where the data is stored and also how the benefits are going to accrue to the customer, and also give an idea of the timelines for accruing those, which, as I mentioned earlier, can actually be very quick. Certainly, 2 to 3 months is quite a common result for most of our customers.
Thank you for that, Jeff. And just to add to Jeff's answer there, we do actually have a handout, as mentioned, as part of the webinar for you to download, and there will be follow-up material following this and a call to action, which is coming up shortly. So back to the questions there. Andy, you referred to a data catalog. What is that, and what does it actually do?
Good question. So what we found is that most organizations, certainly from an IT or from a data team viewpoint, they spend their time really trying to keep tabs and understand what data they've got across the business, who has access to what it's being used for, etc. And that's typically been quite a manual process. What we've seen, because we've seen organizations now deploying software as a service and other technologies, certainly from the lines of business, and they can do that very simply and easily, as we've discussed. Actually, it's getting harder and harder for organizations to keep a handle on what data they've got. It's just becoming a lot more of a challenging issue to manage. And certainly trying to keep tabs of things manually is becoming even more challenging. And part of the reason for that, of course, is most organizations are either static in terms of the number of employees they have within their teams, or if they are getting increases in staff, in most organizations, they're looking at doing very much more value-adding type activities. So a data catalog is really an automated technology that tries to offload and do a lot of that work for an organization rather than having to have people doing it manually. So for us, it's about how we can use technology to go and discover data. So effectively, whether it be data that's sitting on-premise or in the cloud, whether it be sitting in a database, or whether it be sitting in an application, whether it be part of a content management system or some other unstructured data form. It's about going and discovering data across all of that, bringing it all together and giving us a view of our data. And the advantage of doing that, of course, is we're using technology to automate the process, which is great from an efficiency viewpoint, but of course it's thorough. Everything that you tell it to look at, it will go and look at it very, very thoroughly. And of course, data, the amount that organizations have, it changes over time. New systems get acquired, old systems get retired, the data inside the system changes. So actually keeping up to date with all of this, it's just become quite hard. And a data catalog, the technology around the data catalog is designed to address that. So it manages through discovery to find where all the data is. And once the data has been found, it brings it together. It brings meaning and understanding so people can see what they've got. And we use artificial intelligence to actually generate some insights from that. So one of the common challenges organizations have is they'll have the duplication of data. They'll have the same copy of data in one place and then in another. Well, actually, through using artificial intelligence and machine learning, we can start to discover the fact that this is the same data, or it's very similar data, or it's related data. All of this brings insight and meaning, so that organizations are really now in a much better position through using a data catalog to have a good view of their data, but also as their data estate changes, how they keep up to date and current with their data. And once they have that, they're now in a position now to really start to unlock the value of that data, regardless of what type of data it is, or where it is, or how it's being used. So we're seeing a data catalog as being a core enabling capability that most organizations are looking at, regardless as to whether it's just for looking at data, or whether it's looking at APIs, or whether it's just looking at how data and content is managed across the estate and across the organization. So one of those key enablers, we see that come up time and time again, and probably one of the biggest questions we get asked about the data catalog in the what is it, is actually it's giving us one place to go where we can see everything we know about the data across our enterprise. And that becomes really useful now because it's giving us that one place of visibility, it's giving us the insights about what that is, about how it's being used, but more importantly, how things are related. And actually increasingly from an automation viewpoint, but also from an innovation viewpoint, we want to understand the relationships between the data that we've got, because understanding those relationships really helps us unlock that value and helps us drive that innovation agenda. So the data catalog we're seeing is really important in terms of how organizations are moving forward.
And you mentioned there around AI and actually the machine learning piece. One of the questions that got sent through to us was actually around machine learning. So how do you utilize machine learning in relation to cloud services?
That's a great question. So I'll probably give you a couple of examples as maybe a way of addressing that. So one of the things I touched on just now when talking about the data catalog, when we've gone and discovered what data we have across the enterprise, then one of the key things I really want to know is what we call similarity. So that may well be either data or a report is maybe a common way of looking at that. We see many organizations have got duplicates or very similar copies of the same report, possibly being created by different people in different organizations, but based on the same data and quite often the same requirements. So actually we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to recognize the fact that these are very similar, the data or reports. And actually we can surface that up. And what that does for an organization is it quickly means that rather than creating a report, maybe somebody could reuse something that already exists, or rather than creating a bare bones report, maybe there's a more complete one that is already available. So we're trying to tap into the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning, really to help drive efficiency out of the data so people can unlock the value from it.
Great. And I think one of the key things, Andy, is actually around being able to utilize, but also automate and optimize the way in which it's being done and the way in which it's being implemented. We've got one final question just before we move on, and that's around something which I think is relevant and conscious in all of our minds, which came in earlier this year, and that is actually around GDPR. So, in regards to cloud and GDPR now coming into place, is there anything that you've seen, Andy, when looking at the financial services market space, which has changed the way in which people are positioning cloud within their organizations and projects?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of different things. I think if I go back even 3 or 4 years, many financial service institutions were reluctant to really look at cloud, particularly when it was housing or storing cloud-based data, really because of security concerns. And I think that security concern, has diminished very, very significantly. So I think many organizations recognize cloud is a secure platform, obviously when it's deployed and managed appropriately. And clearly there's guidelines and help and rules in how to do that. And from a GDPR viewpoint, I think making sure that data is secured and it's been managed in a proper way, I think is important. But I think people have also started to recognize, again, coming back to the data catalog, is that if we do have data that's sitting in the cloud, actually understanding what data I've got in the cloud and who has access to it and for what purpose. It's materially important, not just for GDPR, but also just for the use of the data from an innovation viewpoint. So GDPR, I think, is just another requirement. And we talked earlier about the governance of data. Then many organizations would suggest that GDPR is a style of governance of data, particularly around sensitive personal information. But I think the world of financial services, is rapidly adopting cloud. And I think they're rapidly adopting the idea that actually cloud is just another way of storing and managing data. It maybe has some slightly different attributes to doing it on-premise, but all the principles of the good governance of data still apply. Therefore, I think organizations, certainly in the financial services space, are quite comfortable with how technology applies in this new world of GDPR.
I think that's a key angle as well. Just as much as we talk about innovation and the potential that cloud has and cloud strategies have, the consciousness within our financial services sector to still be compliant and be within regulation is still of high importance. So thank you everyone for sending in your questions. That will be the end of our question and answer session. So the call to action very much is to get into contact with us. Jeff already spoke around the promotion offer that is being offered from Agile Solutions and Informatica collaboratively, but in essence, we want to be able to communicate with you and understand in more detail what we touched on with our poll earlier on, which is where you are with your organization at the moment and where we can work collaboratively to be able to help you on your cloud journey. So with that, thank you everyone for your attending. I appreciate your time and your attention, and we look forward to discussing and collaborating with you further. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.